Hi everyone. Thank you very much for coming to our Victorian Rural Internship Information Evening. Before we begin, I'd like to ask Keisha to do the acknowledgement of country.
Hi everyone, and thank you for attending our event tonight. I'd just like to start with an acknowledgement of country. My name is Keisha. I'm one of the co-presidents of Wildfire. I'm a proud Torres Strait Islander woman currently living on Boonwurrung country on the Mornington Peninsula. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of which we all meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Thank you.
Thanks, Keisha, and thanks everyone for coming tonight. This event is run by Wildfire, Nomad, Rounds and Outlook Rural Health Clubs. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, the Australian College of Rural and Remote Medicine, who you'll be hearing from a little bit later in the evening. And thank you to all of our speakers for making the time to come and present today. Just some housekeeping before we begin. Feel free to put your camera on if you want, but we'll just ask for everyone to please stay muted during the event. We've compiled a list of questions that people have submitted while they were registering, and we'll answer some of these at the end of the night. And you're welcome to post any extra questions you have in the chat. Although do keep in mind that we've received heaps and heaps of questions and we won't have time to answer them all tonight, but we'll do our best to answer the most frequent questions and ones that we feel like haven't been covered in the talks. I'd like to start off by welcoming two speakers from PMCV, Julie Farrow and Jenny Smith, to talk about the Victorian Rural Preferential Allocation.
Thanks so much, Jade. Is it Jade? Yep. Thanks so much. This is Julie Farrow. I'm just going to share my screen, everybody, so to start our presentation. Hopefully we're right to go. If I can get a thumbs up from somebody that it's up on the screen. Thank you very much. So obviously I'm Julie Farrow. I'm the PMCV CEO, and I'm very pleased to be here this evening to give you the details, which I'm sure you're interested in hearing about, the Victorian Rural Preferential Allocation, which is the first of its kind in Victoria this year, being introduced this year for 2022. And I'm going to go through some, hopefully we cover most of the details and the questions that you're after. We have got limited time tonight, so we won't be able to cover as many questions, hopefully, but we'll certainly be able to take questions through our email and other venues through the PMCV website. So without further ado, I'll start. So that's me, if you can see me, and the vision at PMCV is to create excellent training environments and opportunities for medical pre-vocational trainees. And our values at PMC are agility, collaboration and equity. So what is the Victorian Rural Preferential Allocation? I'm going to call it VRPA today for short, rather because it's a bit of a mouthful. So it's the first of its kind being introduced in this year's match. It's round one of the match. It's actually, there's many rounds in the intern match, and it actually will prioritise Victorian trained candidates and interstate trained candidates with a strong Victorian connection, meaning that you did your schooling in Victoria, whose intent is to work rurally, regionally or rurally. It will enable you as a potential candidate to have an early offer prior to the metro and the outer metro positions being offered to those candidates. So first round, first chance at getting those positions, and obviously a whole process that goes with that. The aim is we really would like to see the rural positions, the majority of the rural positions filled in this round. And we'll hear from the Victorian Rural Generalist Program after my talk tonight, and all Rural Generalists for RG1, we're calling them, will be offered in this match, in this round, and only in this round. It should hopefully provide a clear pathway from rural clinical schools to postgraduate training in rural and regional Victoria. And the aim, long-term aim, is to build a sustainable medical workforce in rural and regional Victoria. Are you eligible? Okay. The eligible candidates must be expected to complete your medical degree this year or have completed your degree in the past 2 years, have not yet commenced work as a doctor in Australia, and you must demonstrate a commitment to working and building your career in rural or regional Victoria. And you will fit within either priority group 1 or the VRPA Priority Group 2, which I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on the next slide. Please note that internationally trained students from overseas are not eligible to apply. So Priority Group 3 are not eligible to apply for the VRPA. So that the eligibility priority groups is Priority Group 1, and that's basically the Victorian medical schools holding Australian citizenship or permanent residency. So University of Melbourne, Monash University, Deakin University, and University of Notre Dame, both the Melbourne and Ballarat clinical schools. You may also hold New Zealand citizenship, that's an eligible for P1, and you must be domestic full fee paying students. And it also includes the Commonwealth supported place students. VRPA Priority Group 2, we've created this year for this round. And you must, like I said earlier, you must have completed your Year 12 schooling in Victoria. Or you are graduates of the University of New South Wales who have undertaken your last 2 years of clinical placement at Albury-Wodonga Clinical School specifically. So what positions are in this program? As I said earlier, the VRGP or RG1 positions, which there are 35, they will all be in the VRPA round. Then there will be also a proportion of rural and regional positions in VRPA, and why I say from the other health services across the regions. And the reason why I say a proportion is because we have there's a Commonwealth agreement that we need to ensure that every Priority 1 student does receive an offer of internship in Victoria first before we can offer positions to P2 and the other categories involved. So the reason we will not know exactly how many positions will be offered in or where the positions will be offered until you register for the round, which once you've registered for VRPA, we'll be able to make that calculation about which positions are how many positions are available in VRPA and where they are. It's quite complex. I'm not going to go into any more detail about it, but it's a quite complex calculation that we need to do to ensure. But I can tell you that for the first time in last year, we offered 819 intern positions across the state. This year, due to the mental health reform agenda, there will be 862 intern positions. So there's a lot of opportunity for candidates to get a position in Victoria. There's more than there ever has been. It's a greater number of positions, and a lot of them are in the rural and regional areas. So that's a really good sign to see that we are increasing the positions in rural and regional. And then the second round, which is what we call the second allocation, or the second round, is that's when the metro positions and some rural positions will be offered. So the positions, the VRGP will probably go into the road. Obviously, Victoria is, if you don't know, is broken up into 5 regions across the outside the metro area, and you can see all the different training programs that are for the VRGP. Outside the VRGP program, there's health services in each of the regions that offer independent intern positions, that are hospital-based intern positions. As I said before, 35 VRGP positions, and as I said, the number of in those other roles and those other positions will be determined at the close of the registration period whilst you're doing your recorded interview. So that's when we'll be able to do that calculation. So, and we will make that available. So you will know so you'll be able to look at once you do your application, you will be able to change that to make sure that you have that information at your disposal to make those decisions. So how do I preference? This year we're offering you to do, you can preference up to 8 positions. PMC strongly recommend that you preference more than one health service. You may be, and the scenario that's been put to us is that you may be a Deakin at the Deakin Clinical School down in Geelong, and you may only want to go to Barwon Health. That's great, but there is other. If you only want to be wish to stay in that particular region, then we recommend that you preference other hospitals in that region. If you only want to work rurally. If, however, you want to work, you have a preference for maybe rural, and maybe you're not too sure, maybe metro or outer metro, then you really shouldn't go into the VRPA. It's not for you. If you're not sure where you want to end up, if you want to end up rurally, or you could be, you might maybe not quite sure until you go through the process, because you will learn things about health services as you go through that process of the recruitment. Just so you know that the Metro Health Services will be assessing candidates at the same time as VRPA assessments. So it's worthwhile that you, if you are going to be in both, that you are looking at both, that you do that, so that you get assessed, that your assessment can be reviewed by both Metro and Rural. It's quite a complicated thing, quite hard to get your head around, but we're happy to work through that with anybody that has not too sure where they should go. Automatically, if you are unsuccessful in the VRPA and you have, that's all you've preferenced, then you will automatically be asked to be submitted into the second round for further round to get a preference, your preferences, and be able to update that. So which match is right for me? So this is just a little bit just to try and simplify this. So the VRPA would suit your career plans if you want to live and work rurally or regionally next year and beyond. So you're looking for a career in a regional rural area. That's where you would like to commence your career and potentially maybe continue on. And you only want to preference rural health services. Like I said, you only want to look at your rural health services. For the VRPA RG1, whoops, sorry, I went too fast. So are you looking for a varied rural generalist experience? Are you interested in undertaking advanced skill in your career plan? Do you want an individualized career plan with one-to-one support from the VRGP team? Are you interested in doing a GP placement during your training? So there are a couple of things to think about, like VRGP will go into the more detail about the consideration for the VRGP. So what benefits you to be in the VRPA rep match? You're matched first. Like I said earlier, you actually get your offer earlier than everybody else if you're in the VRP round. And so it's an early offer. And we think is going to be a relatively good draw card is that you only do one application. You don't need to apply for every health service. You can just do one application that will be reviewed by the regional panels that are being set up to consider your application. One online live interview, and VRPA candidates have access to to apply for a scholarship called the Victorian Rural Medical Scholarship, and that if you're successful, there's 12 scholarships and offered at $20,000 per individual. So if you're a successful candidate in the VRPA, then you may be considered if you put in an application. That's part of the application process for VRPA, so you'll get asked the questions if you wish to apply, and that's paid to you before you start your intern year, so you can help you get set up in maybe relocating or setting yourself up to be in regional areas. Mindful of time, sorry. And like I said, and the only VRPA health service that wishes to have separate applications is Barwon Health. How do I apply to VRPA? Like I said, the VRPA is part of the intern application. You need to log on to the PMCV, and we've got this. This is what you see on the right. What we see is that's what you'll log on. Click onto the allocation and placement service, highlighted in orange there, and register your account. You need to set up a candidate account and register your account now. You can do that now. And then on the Tuesday, the 4th of May, it opens up, the actual match opens up for you to actually do your application. And once you're registered, you'll get email notifications to keep you up to date. There's some key dates for you to know. Save these dates. So like I said, the actual application opens on Tuesday, 4th of May. It closes, so you must have it in, and we do suggest that you get it in early. The reason why we say get your application in early is because you will be required to ask for 2 clinical references, and they need to give them the most amount of time to actually complete that reference on your behalf. You still will be eligible if you meet the eligibility criteria for your application to go through without a CV, without references, but that's really not giving you the best chance of being assessed for all your qualities and attributes. As part of it, all matches a recorded interview. That recorded interview will be from opens on 10 a.m. on Friday, 4th of June, and closes on Sunday, the 6th of June. You can do that. You'll get a link on and through the allocation placement service. You can do that anytime through that period. So there's more information about that. We're doing an intern webinar on Monday night, the AMA Expo. So there's more details about that sort of part of that process. And the VRP offers are out on the 5th of July. So you will know on the 5th of July where you're going for 2022, and you'll have the ability to accept or decline that offer on that date. Just a bit more. Our website will have FAQ sheets up for you. So they're already there now. A webinar recording we did last week. More reading material, and like I said, next week, Monday the 26th of April, we're sponsoring PMCC, it's sponsoring the AMA Expo, so we'll be speaking more detail about all the details about the application process. Hope to see you there. And just if you have, we might not get through any questions now. Understand we've got a big full program. Jenny Smith, who's online with us today, is our VRG coordinator at PMCV, and she will be more than happy to answer any questions either via email or if we can get to any of the chat tonight. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Julie. And as you said, we'll be answering questions at the end of the night tonight. So I'd like to invite Shane to speak next about the Victorian Rural Generalist Program.
I might get started, Shane, while you're loading that. So hi everyone, I'm Angela Stratton and I'm a rural generalist in Mount Beauty, Victoria. I don't know how many of you know the Falls Creek ski fields and the little town of Mount Beauty, about an hour south of Albury-Wodonga, and we're part of the Hume Victorian Rural Generalist Program, the practice that I work in, and I'm the statewide clinical lead for the VRGP. And I've got Shane Boyer with us tonight as well, and he's the statewide coordinator, basically overseeing the new VRGP across the whole state. And I am so excited to see we've got, minus the presenters, 140 of keen rural, like-minded people on here tonight. And whether you're interested in rural generalism specifically or just some rural training and getting a rural experience, I'm really excited to have you all here. So Shane, do you want to kick on to the next slide? So what is a rural generalist? I just want to make this clear, because I did chat with a student the other day at the Rural Doctors Association of Victoria meeting who said she'd had very minimal exposure to rural generalists. And I think even in the rural clinical schools, because we're sort of out in the smaller towns, some of the times you might not see us. So a rural generalist is a fellow of either ACRM or the RACGP plus some advanced training in fellowship of advanced rural practice. So basically what they are, Shane, I'm going to kick on to the next slide. I like to summarise them as a doctor who has the skills to do whatever it takes to serve the needs of their rural community. And the reason I pop that there, and Shane, I think you've got it in speaker view. I'm not sure if you want to flick it onto your main view, but yeah, the reason I say that is because every rural generalist that I know practices differently depending on what the community that they work in needs. So what we do have in common is that all rural generalists are trained to provide emergency medicine in their communities, primary care, so that's your GP component, but also secondary inpatient care. So that's the ability to be able to admit to smaller rural hospitals and look after your own patients in your own hospitals, which is a very rewarding experience. But then obviously you have the option to refer them on to tertiary centres if they become more unwell. Now, every rural generalist also has advanced training, so that's an additional 12 months in a particular skill, which may be anything from procedural like anaesthetics or obstetrics to some of the non-procedural ones such as mental health and palliative care. And in my personal case, I initially trained in obstetrics, but now do emergency and alpine medicine for those of you who might be interested in the ski slope. So a rural generalist career is incredibly diverse, but also incredibly rewarding. So I just want to pop on to the next slide, please, Shane. So while I talk a little bit about my life as a rural generalist, I'll let you read what's up on the slide there, and Shane's still trying to sort it all out, but that's okay. basically, I started off not sure whether I wanted a rural career or not, and did some rural placements in Albury Wodonga, but very quickly realised that the metro hospitals weren't for me. I was a rural kid, and I really, really enjoyed being out there and getting a lot more hands-on experience is what you get in the regional training. And particularly, I look at our Murray to Mountains or Hume VRGP interns, and they're right in there, hands-on, dealing with our emergencies, up at the snow with us, putting dislocated shoulders back in, which is a completely different experience to what I had in those metro hospitals, where there was often quite a hierarchy of registrars between myself and my consultant. And I know that the rural interns do get a very diverse experience. How are you going there, Shane? On the can you click on slide number 4? It might be easier just to have that one up.
Yeah, so you can see that now?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're just seeing the main
slideshow.
slide. So if you click on slide 4, we can
Shane,
go
try to go
on
to
your left
slideshow.
panel. It's a great start, but
You
that's
might
all
have
right.
to stop sharing and just share again. That might help.
Yeah,
That's all right.
I'm not sure what's showing that view.
So while Shane's still sorting that out, I guess from my perspective, one of the things to consider if you are looking at rural generalism from a clinical perspective before Shane goes into the actual details of the program, is that rural generalism is realised as a priority area for the Commonwealth, and hence all the states are now developing their own Victorian rural generalist programs. So we know that what we're really doing at the moment is streamlining training for doctors who do want to go rural. And one of the key features of the things that we're offering as part of our program is actually some case management and support all the way through. Shane, do you want to kick on to the next slide?
Is that working now? You can see it now?
It is, yeah.
Oh, cool.
We're on to SuperDoc slide. You can go to my next one. So one of the things I'd also like to say that if you come and do a rural generalist intern position, although obviously they're designed for people who know they want to have a rural generalist career, but even if you're just considering it and you'd like to come out and experience what it's like, because I think without going into one of these positions, you won't necessarily have that same exposure that you would get by truly working side by side with a rural generalist. You're not actually committed to rural generalist training in that intern year. So that's just something to remember. We do preference those that have a strong rural intent, but you don't have to be 100% ready to go. It's basically for people who are really interested in it and would like to come out and have that experience and get that exposure. Shane, I'll hand over to you. You can kick on to the next slide.
Thanks, Angela. Sorry about that, guys. I've got 2 screens and it was showing the wrong screen, I think. So Angela's just giving you a real good wrap up of what a rural generalist is, and a little bit about her experience in being a rural generalist. There's also a program that goes with that. So the Victorian Rural Generalist program, which is absolutely fantastic, is being funded by both the Commonwealth and state governments, health departments, to support those people going into a rural generalist program. And I think that's a really important aspect. There's programs that have been going around for probably, well, one program for 10 years and others for about 5 years now, the rural community intern programs that were supported by the Department of Health in Victoria. And they didn't have near the support that this program now has got. So as Angela said before, we've got a statewide group who are providing a lot of support, particularly at a policy and structural level. And then we have a variety of regions who support these programs. So if you're looking at rural generalism and going into one of these RG1 programs, it's absolutely fantastic support now to help you there. So as we mentioned before, the objective really is about increasing the opportunities for employment of rural generalists right across rural Victoria. And that's what the structure's there for, to support. The statewide coordination team, Angela mentioned that before. There's myself and Angela and Kate who work at that senior level. And then we've got a number of clinical leads, both in anaesthetics, obstetrics, emergency medicine and paediatrics, who again can support all trainees who are looking at those particular pathways. The program across the state has a number of different pathways, and those pathways are very specific to the regions. It's about what's needed in the regions where the work and long-term career opportunities are. And then those pathways, different than in the past, are much more structured in regard to the funding. So most of these pathways are RG1, RG2 or intern and PGY 2 years, and then a rural generalist advanced training at around year 3, 4. And then going into a consolidation of skills. And all of those positions now are guaranteed funding, which is terrific for someone who's looking to particularly go to a region and settle down for a period of time and know what they're going to do. Regional coordinators are one of the main parts of our program here. So each of the 5 regions that Julie mentioned before have a regional coordinator, and they also have an RG1 manager. So both of those people work together to support any of the trainees coming into the region. And they really provide a whole heap of support, from case management support to identification of career opportunities. They look at the development of particularly advanced skills posts and lead you and help you to get into a pathway and stay in the region for as long as possible. I mentioned before about the clinical leads. So we have a clinical lead for each one of those disciplines, and Angela's really lucky because she gets all the others. So she supports you in all of the other areas, whether it be mental health, PAL care, adult internal medicine, etc. So you've always got someone who you can go to help, who's been there and done that in regard to being a real generalist. And the final part of that structure is regional networks. So it's something I think is really important for potential trainees coming into each one of those regions, is there's really big buy-in from all of the health services, from the training organisations, from the primary health networks, and a number of other people that have set up networks in those regions who meet on a regular basis to talk about what opportunities and what's needed to be done in those regions to progress opportunities both for training but also for career development. So how does the program look? It's not just a one-year program, and I think again that's really important. In the past it's been a little bit of a single-year program, of which many of the regions have worked hard at to actually make into a longer-term program for to look at work sustainability and workforce. So what the program is to the VRGP, if you want to enter, as Julie mentioned before, the standard entry point is as an RG1 through the rural preferential system. I won't talk about that a lot because Julie's spoken quite clearly about that and how to do that. But that's the entry point that you guys are looking at in regard to your intern entry point. Whoops. Those programs also have a number of other years. So you follow on from your RG1, that now the program is linked to RG2 positions. So each one of those RG1 positions that you can go into has a funded year 2 position at the health service. And we're in the midst at the moment of drafting up or finalising actually multi-year training agreements. And then what follows on from there is the potential for RGA positions, the advanced skills positions, and there's 47 of those across the state. So there's no reason if you go into an entry point through the RG1, through the rural preferential system, that you can't look at and build a pathway right through, of which you can work with your regional coordinators in particular to identify that. So for example, if you were going into the Loddon Mallee region, you might start at Mildura and end up with work in Swan Hill. There can be a pathway linked to that, that process, which ensures that you get an advanced skill, for example, in anaesthetics. So here are the regions. I think what's really important from here is that to identify that there's 5 different regions, and they all have slightly different opportunities in each one of those regions. And that's why we have regional coordinators to identify those, to build those, and to support you guys as you go into those regions. So Barwon Southwest, Julie mentioned that before, it starts off really from Barwon and goes right through down into Warrnambool. There's 5 intern positions in that area, of which they go into 5 weeks in general, 10 weeks in general practice. A really good region, opportunities at places like Hamilton, Portland, and a number of other regions around there, including Warrnambool, of course. Gippsland. So Gippsland's a little bit unique. It has 5 RG1 positions, but also has another training program called GRIT, which is a similar type program, but it's not directly part of the VRGP. But that's not to say that you couldn't come through lateral entry if you went into the GRIT program. So Gippsland again has 5 intern positions, and those 5 intern positions are based in general practice for 20 weeks. So again, you can already see the slight differences in each of the programs. And again, great opportunities there in anaesthetics, obstetrics, I think we've just looked at a paediatrics position there and looking at mental health for the future. The Grampians region, very strongly linked to Ballarat Health. That's where you'll do quite a bit of your training, and also St John of God in Ballarat. They also have 5 positions, and they have general practice placements in places like Maryborough and Ararat. So again, looking at that region, what would suit you? Maybe somewhere like Horsham would be the place you could go, also for opportunities there for longer term work. The Hume region again is a little bit unique. It's a program that's been going for a little bit longer than some of the others. So there are 15 intern positions there. And again, those positions are 20 weeks in general practice. Opportunities again in places like Mansfield and Mount Beauty, up at Falls Creek, where you're looking at some of those snowfield type opportunities, but lots of opportunities in anaesthetics, obstetrics, paediatrics. It's a huge range of opportunities there. Loddon Mallee. So again, we talked about Loddon Mallee before, really diverse area. You've got Mildura, you've got Swan Hill, right down through to Echuca and also Bendigo. So quite diverse. They have 5 positions in RG1. All of those positions have 10 weeks into general practice. And at the moment, those positions in general practice are out of Echuca. Just a couple of little clips here. So although the program is the first year of the Rural Generalist program, and the first year really of the RG1, so to speak, in regard to the support that the whole team is providing. The rural community intern programs that you may have heard of before have been going for a number of years, and lots of people have come through that program. And I think that's one of the main reasons why, at even a national level, I think that they've looked at from a national level at supporting these RG programs. That case management support will really help people get through. And just like a couple of these testimonials, there's lots of people who've come through those ARSIT programs and really had good outcomes. You know, places like Hume have got, I think, 21 people who've graduated who are still around doing RG type work. So all I can say is that really the VRGP now and the RG1 programs are really a bit like the old ARSIT with steroids, because there's so much more support there, so many more opportunities, and a lot at local level. So I think it's a great opportunity if you're interested in rural generalism, and particularly looking at it starting at that point to see where you go from being an intern. Well, before we go into questions, just I think what's really important, if you guys have an opportunity through the week with AMA next week, it's really important to go to those regional sites. We're giving you a bit of an overview today, but those regional sites with the regional coordinators and the RG1 managers, they know their regions intimately. They can talk to you about what opportunities and how that looks for you. And I think that's really important when you're making your decisions in regard to ranking which one of those programs you're going to go to. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela and Shane. I think, like I said before, we'll probably hold off for questions until the very end. So thank you very much for talking. We're now going to be moving on to the next part of our session, where we get to hear from 4 doctors from different sized rural hospitals and programs. So our first speaker is Dr. Jessica Paintner, who will be talking about her experience at Bendigo Health.
Hi everyone, my name's Jess. Let me just try and share my screen with you. I don't know if that's sharing any further. Can you guys see that? Great. So my name's Jess. I'm a resident here at Bendigo this year. I was an intern in 2020 during COVID. So I just firstly wanted to start just briefly talking about what my life looks like. I live in the Red Circle region in Bendigo. It's a suburb called Kennington. I brought my own house at the end of internship last year. I have a 7-minute push bike commute to the hospital with the cross there. And just the 2 smiley faces there are the national parks, which are less than 10 minutes running to my house. So that's really important for me to be able to get on the trails. In terms of Bendigo Health, we had a new hospital which was built and opened in 2017. It still feels very new to this day, and it's a very well functioning hospital. What most people comment on is just how nice and beautiful it is of a place to work. In terms of our catchment, we kind of fall into that Loddon Mallee region that Shane was just talking about. So we obviously Mildura have their own hospital, and we only take occasional referrals for them for some specialties like cardiology and plastics, and that really heightened last year when a lot of the SA border was shut. But we also go down as far as Woodend. Apparently we have a 724 bed service, but I don't think I think it's more around 500, 600 at the moment. But we have 11 operating theatres and do about 15,000 surgeries per year. We also collect the Swan Hill and Echuca region. They have their own hospitals that function very well, and we often just take specialist referrals from them as well. So in terms of my intern year in 2020, I got my 2 first preference non-core rotations, which were urology and orthopedics. I'm pretty procedurally based. So I was lucky enough to get my 2 first non-core preferences. That doesn't mean if you do come to Bendigo Health that you will. It's just very dependent on your cohort. But also had emergency at the start of the year, so I got to go on leave before COVID hit as well. In terms of some of the questions that were put forth, there was a question about does rural background help? So I'm pretty much as rural as you can get, and I'm from the Loddon Mallee region myself, MM5, with a strong rural background. Personally, I don't think any of these particularly help too much aside from having a strong clinical placement rurally and a reason why I wanted to come rurally. So I don't see them as an advantage or disadvantage. So I wouldn't be disheartened if you haven't had much rural exposure. If you sell yourself as really keen and you have a strong reason as to why you want to come rurally, then I think that's will suffice. In terms of career progression and career opportunities, personally, I chose Bendigo Health because that's where I thought I would thrive the most. And I would tell you to trust your gut when picking where you want to go and in which regions. Different regions will serve different purposes for you. In terms of my career progression, my professional development leave has always been approved. Obviously, you have to tick the boxes of getting it in beforehand and all that kind of thing, but I've never had it pushed back, as I've heard from other metropolitan hospitals. I now have a bit of a teaching post at Monash University as well as a PGY2, just with a small tutorial kind of thing. And the Chief Deputy Medical Officer just emailed me the other day about some leadership opportunities. There's also lots of funding available to undertake courses. So last year, I think I received approximately $2,000 of funding from my regional training hub and from the Rural Workforce Agency Victoria. So, and just finally, colloquially, I was scrubbed in and the first and only assist to both the Director of Orthopedics and Director of Urology last year. So I think my career has really thrived rurally, and I think this is the best place for me to be to progress. And in terms of the advantages of rural and regional internship, obviously everyone throws the procedures line around, and that's certainly the case. Even this year in the emergency department, I've already done a few hip relocations. I did a nasoendoscopy the other day, all with the assistance of a supervising person, obviously, but that was only available because we don't have an ENT service here. Personally, I prefer the shorter commutes. I can ride my bike safely to work. There's lots of professional networking opportunities. Even the other day, I was in the elevator just talking to the head of anaesthetics, even though I'm not particularly interested in anaesthetics, but you know, there's those opportunities as well. And I just feel like a really valued community member, even though Bendigo's got quite a large population. I feel really valued within the community. I'm sure you can probably read on the PMCV about the rotations available at Bendigo Health. I just wanted to highlight the external rotations. There are 2 non-core rotations available to Echuca each term, emergency and general medicine. They're really well undertaken. Everyone who goes to Echuca preferences that. And Echuca obviously already have their own interns as well, so you're not the only intern out there. And that's quite a highly prized rotation that a lot of people like to go to. And there are certainly further opportunities as a resident to go back to Echuca, Swan Hill and Castlemaine. I think that's a really good opportunity to widen your skill set, to work in different hospitals and see how our smaller services function, especially when you're referring to a larger regional centre. I just wanted to highlight some services we don't have at Bendigo, just in case that influences you in any way. We don't have a current public dermatology service. There are some medical services that we don't have, so neurology, we don't have a public neurology service here. There are only private neurology, so all of our first seizures kind of go to the Austin, but we manage all the strokes just on the general medical unit. So that's a good opening experience for everyone just on general medicine to understand basic medical skills rather than subspecializing. In terms of surgical, we don't have regular vascular and ENT. They're only elective visiting cases. We don't have cardiothoracics or neurosurgery, and I don't envisage us having that anytime in the future. We do have a general surgeon who has a subspecialist interest in thoracics. So that's really exciting because you get to go watch video-assisted thoracoscopies, lobectomies, and I even got to see a pericardial window with him. So that's a lot of fun. Something else that I just think is fun that we have here at Bendigo is we have HEMS 3. So one of the helicopters is based here. That's just across the road through the over the road tunnel that you can see there. So you can always hear the helicopter coming and going. It doesn't mean that we get all the helicopter referrals who they go out to retrieve, depending upon their injuries or the patient's condition. Doesn't always mean they come here. They sometimes go on to Melbourne, but it's always, I think it's always exciting and fun to watch. And when they come into the emergency department, I think Bendigo Health can always improve like every service. So some things that we're working on at the moment is increased specialty training opportunities. And one thing we're doing is this year is the first year that we're doing a dual Bendigo Austin BPT training service where trainees spend half their time at Bendigo and half their time at Austin. And that's hopefully just to increase our general medical workforce. We don't have as many residents as needed to fill all positions. So often that puts a lot of pressure on some of the doctors, but we're working on increasing greater medical workforce, especially to cover sick leave and that kind of thing. I've just put a little slide here for beyond internship at Bendigo Health, which can be viewed later just upon what the rotations are beyond internship in the future. But my general advice for rural and regional internship is to trust your gut. You probably have an idea of where you would like to go, and I'd recommend going where you think you will thrive the most. I'd like you to consider what do you like to do outside of work. If you really like surfing or something like that, then potentially Bendigo or Mildura isn't the place for you because we're pretty reasonably far inland. I would encourage you not to let other people's opinions dictate your own career in life. So if you really want to go to Mildura because you think that's the best position for you and the best place for you to thrive, then I would encourage you to go there. To have some general end goals in mind. You don't have to have a dead set fire set goal known at the moment, but just have some general end goals in mind to sell on your interview. Remember that you are your best advocate, and not everyone gets to go where they want next year. Disappointment is a part of this career in life, so take stock and work towards your next achievements. But good luck with everyone with all your internship applications. It's a stressful time, but and good luck with all the interviews. If you have any questions about Bendigo Health, just let me know. But thanks.
Thanks very much, Jessica. We'll move on to our next speaker now. So we've got Dr. Shukar Bodapalli to speak about Goulburn Valley Health.
Hey guys, thanks. Yeah, so as Jade said, my name's Shrika. So I did my internship in Shepparton last year, so in 2020, again during the COVID year, and now I'm a PGY2 at Northern. Let me just quickly share my screen. Where are we? Here we are. Hang on, guys. Had a bit of an issue here. Give me one tick. Hang on, I don't think I can share my screen, unfortunately.
Oh, do I need to make you host? Is that the issue?
No, that's okay. I'll just quickly talk about it. That's fine. Okay. So just to let you know, so as I was saying, so I did my internship in Shepparton last year. So just to give you a quick rundown of Shepparton itself. So Shepparton is a very, very tight-knit community. So it's situated along the Goulburn River. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of things that you can do along the river. So it's quite a cultural town. There's a range of extracurricular activities. The town itself is quite built around sport and various art and volunteering type activities. So there's a lot of things to do in and around the city. It's also quite close to a lot of other touristy type spots like Echuca. You can also head up to things like Wodonga and Albury. You know, it's a bit of a drive, but it's still doable in a day. So these are all quite a lot of things that people were willing to do last year, but unfortunately, given the COVID restrictions, we couldn't necessarily do. And the other thing that I think you'll find is a running theme throughout this whole presentation or this whole talk today is that the commute to the hospital is quite close. The town is very much largely built around and built along the whole hospital. So a lot of things are surrounding the hospital, and as a result, you'll find a lot of doctors, a lot of medical staff and allied health staff just living quite close to the hospital. And the other bonus, I guess, is that it's just only 2.5 hours, so 2.5 hours to the city of Melbourne. So if you ever need to come back, that's not too much of an issue. In terms of GVH itself, so GVH is around a 300-bedded hospital. There's a range of general specialties that are available. So obviously, there's the medical and surgical specialties, as well as E&D, emergency, along with ONG, pediatrics, and aged care rehab. You also have a few extra specialties like anesthetics, orthopedics, and oncology, but a lot of the things that we do in terms of the specialty side of things are a little bit lesser compared to the general specialties. But this doesn't necessarily change your experience because there's a lot of exposure to practical medicine. You'll be right amongst it and doing a lot of things that will require you to get quite hands-on with various different procedures or things like shoulder allocations or any sort of joint allocations, really. It's a quite significantly good training that's available for interns. It's mixed in with experience from various scores of people. So you'll have people coming in from various different hospitals, as well as people from international medical backgrounds. So they can give their 2 cents in regards to how their experience was back from wherever they were. And you'll also have experience coming in from general practitioners who come into the ED to often help out in things with emergency side of things. It's also quite a good pace. This allows for plenty of time to actually do the job, but also focus on your own health and make sure that you still have a good work-life balance, which as an intern is quite useful. And the beauty of GVH was, at least towards the end of last year, we had a new inpatient tower that opened along with a new ED and ICU. So a lot of new things have opened up, which I guess this year's interns are lucky to use a lot more, which is good. Now, speaking solely from my experience last year, so I completed the ED, medicine and surgical rotations that were required for an intern. And in addition to that, I also got to do an anesthetics term as well as an orthopedic term as well. Given my very broad sort of experience, I had a very broad range of medical training that I received during internship, and a lot of skills were learned, a lot of which were practical skills, which have quite easily translated into my PGY2 year. I was also able to participate in teaching with University of Melbourne. So there's the University of Melbourne Clinical School out in Shepparton. So you get a lot of students from MD2 and I think MD4 as well, who often take part in things like ward rounds and various other around the day sort of jobs that you'll see in the hospital. And adding to that, I was also able to take part in a lot of audits or research opportunities through GVH, which is another bonus that you can get. The other thing, which I think, again, you'll see a lot of in rural hospitals just in general, is you'll have a lot of discussions with metropolitan hospitals, a lot of liaising for any medical issue that requires specialist advice, but also for things like transfers to metro hospitals. Because of that, you get to also experience the administrative side of things, where you often are the person that's involved in organising the ambulance transfer and things like that to various hospitals. So, which is another good bonus, because you don't necessarily experience that once you're in the metropolitan hospital. And given that, you know, it's a rural hospital, there's a lot of independence, a lot of autonomy to do various tasks, but you also get a lot of different teaching from various scores of people as well. The other thing that I got to do, fortunately, during my internship was that I was also able to be part of the wider community. I had, fortunately, I was also able to take part in very semi-regular social sport, which again boosted my internship experience in general, as well as the fact that, you know, prior to COVID, I was also able to volunteer at the local community football club. So there's a lot of different opportunities that do prop up here and there, as long as, you know, you just keep your ear out for it, and you should be able to do things like that as they come up. One of the things that I think Jade sent me through earlier was a lot of questions that people were potentially asking about supports at GVH, or supports just in general in a rural hospital. You do have a lot of support that's available. The director of intern training is a great person. She's very, very involved in all the interns and all the experiences that the interns are having. And the other thing is the medical workforce is also quite involved as well. They both have a open door policy. So whenever there's any issue, you can always come into their office or just shoot them a message and they'll be more than happy to help out, or just, you know, if you need a ear to listen to as well, they're more than available, more than, you know, ready to be available for you. The other supports, I guess, are more in a day-to-day sort of basis. You have your consultants and registrars and residents who are also able to help you with various different things that do pop up here and there. And trust me, you do have a lot of things that do pop up throughout your intern experience, but it's just good to have someone that will just sit there and just have a listen to you and have a chat to you and give you advice in regards to these things. Majority of the issues that do arise during internship are largely solved amongst GVH, but I do encourage everyone to just be aware that if there is anything that's needed or requires support that, you know, extends beyond the scope of GVH, that there are 24/7 basis supports that are provided for doctors, like Doctors for Doctors and DHAS, which, you know, I'm more than ready to listen to you and help you out when that's needed. The advantages of being at GVH specifically, or the things that I noticed, so as you can imagine with any rural hospital or any rural experience, there is a lot of practical exposure that you will get. You'll be very well versed with things like IVCs, IDCs, and as well as like your specialist procedures that you wouldn't think that you'd necessarily do in internship, things like acidic taps or lumbar punctures and things like that, which, you know, are often quite useful. Just a quick sort of anecdote, I guess, that I was fortunate enough to do an acidic tap last year, and during my rotation in oncology this year at Northern, I was asked to do one again, and it just so happened that the two registrars that I had both unfortunately didn't have too much experience either. One had never done it and he's an advanced trainee. So it was just, you know, a little bit of a difference, and he'd done all of his training through metropolitan hospitals. So you do get a lot of exposure to things that you wouldn't otherwise think you'd get until later on in your career. And similar to what I was alluding a little bit before, there's a lot of autonomy, so be prepared to make decisions. You know, having a rural experience is also a bonus for just resume building and future career progression. And you're able to continue research, as I said, through the GVH Research Community Committee. Lastly, I'll just quickly touch on general advice. There's plenty of exposure to various medical conditions, regardless of where you go to rurally. It's a steep learning curve, but you do become more comfortable in various different situations more quickly, and that will help you just moving forward in your career. Just be prepared to be asked to do a lot of things. However, there is always help provided, so don't feel like you're drowning in the mix or anything. It makes for a better experience if you immerse yourself in the community, and that I think I noticed myself firsthand. And similar to what another question that Jade was saying is, I found that there was no bearing on future employability in terms of into the metropolitan system if you do choose to come back. If anything, I found that it was considered quite favorably. And lastly, you know, you have a tighter internship cohort in the rural setting. Just a lot of us are just in those regions. As I said, you're quite close to the hospital, so you do tend to spend a lot of time with each other, and that makes for a good experience as well. All right, thanks guys. Just feel free to let me ask any questions at the end if you have. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Rika. We're going to move on now to Dr. Elise Lai from ACRM, who we're very thankful for sponsoring our event tonight. So I'll hand over to her now.
Great, thank you very much for having me. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep. Great.
Just let me know if I'm, you know, not keeping to time, which I notoriously don't. I'd like to better screen share, probably showing my dinosaur vintage, but how to do it. So sorry, just bear with me. Share screen. I also talk out loud, so I think it's very good for communication, but it also can be annoying. So just bear with me. There, can you guys all see that? Great, there's a few nods up there, that's excellent. So I was really excited. Thank you very much for having me. I do apologize. I only found out about doing this and perhaps got roped in to do this yesterday. And I thought I had plenty of time to do it this morning because I wasn't technically working. But then I was up managing a birth that I thought was going to be career ending, actually. It was really quite nerve-wracking, but baby has ended up well. But I finished at 7 a.m. and I rushed back to get my kids to school, and then I've basically been pretty much out of action until half an hour ago. So I got the nod that I was on, and I've only just finished a few present slides, but bear with me if it's all a little bit everywhere. The saving grace was that I was supposed to play tennis tonight, and the weather is really crappy if you're in Victoria. So perhaps we can just enjoy being nice and warm together for this webinar. Most importantly, I guess, I'm a GP rural generalist with ACRM. I went through, out of all those letters, the most important thing I think is that I was one of you guys. I'm assuming you're from Monash University, is that right? No?
We're from everywhere around, so Melbourne, Monash, Deakin, and Notre Dame.
That's just killed my presentation. No. Anyway, well, wherever you guys are from, thank you for joining and talking to, listening to me tonight. I'll just scrap that alumni Monash Uni bit then. I just perhaps put this up because it was actually part of another presentation, and I don't know how relevant it is, except that I think lots of us have FOMO. And I think if you are interested in being a real journalist, if you want to be the doctor on the plane when somebody puts their hand up and say, we need a doctor in there, you're like, okay, I can do this. I don't, whatever it is that comes my way, I can do something. ACRM potentially is a good career choice for you guys. I was flicking through some photos, honestly, 5 minutes ago, and first year medical student, this is what I came up with. I did my John Flynn scholarship up in Cooktown, which is I think 3 or 4 hours north of Cairns, and it's probably a really touristy destination now. I don't know if anyone's ever been there. Nod if you have. But back then, you know, quite a few years ago, it was a bit of a wild place. There's a remote nurse there on the left who was excellent. This was a locum doctor from Adelaide who was fantastic, and we did a house visit on a houseboat on the river there. And I don't think we realised that that lady there was actually a lesbian and quite interested in my doctor supervisor, and tried to get her stoned. So that was my first introduction to country experience in rural Australia. This was going to a remote Aboriginal clinic, and you'd take a full drive and you'd stop at a waterfall, and you know, some Indigenous kids would come and show you a turtle. So some amazing. I have worked also in Melbourne, like I did my internship at the Alfred Hospital. I really enjoyed the rotation. I suppose for me, I never found a specialty rotation that really sang out to me. And I think that spoke to the fact that I was ultimately a rural journalist. I think you can get a little bit sucked into the, I'm just going to say it, the ego of being a specialist and not just a GP or rural journalist. But I would strongly advise you guys, not to, necessarily get sucked into that. And I guess my role is I am biased. I'm going to get you guys to all become rural journalists. And if I am talked out of a job tonight, then I know I've done my job. This is currently where I'm based, and with COVID, I'm there a lot more than often these days in Leongatha, which is in South Gippsland. This presentation was for a whole bunch of ACRM registrars, so all over the country. So I do know that you probably know where it is. If you ever get a chance to go to one of our rural medical conferences, it's called the RMA, please do. I think it's in Perth in October this year. Hopefully it's still going to go ahead face to face, though there are online options from what I hear. Dr. Joanne Farmer was a doctor I heard at a conference 2 years ago from this conference, and she called herself just a GP, but actually she is the Director of Medical Services for the United Nations. And two big quotes that I have stuck with me ever since. For your ACRM rural journalist, you may not be the best person for the job, but you are the best person there. And I'll show you some examples of that. She also said, I'm not an expert in anything. Having said that, she's actually a black belt martial arts, guru, but this just shows the humility of her. I'm not an expert in anything, and that's my strength. And that really, really resonated with me as well as a rural journalist. This is PNG, where I did a master's in public health as part of, after my intern year at the Alfred, I went up to Cairns, and I really found my tribe up in far north Queensland. And I did a master's, and that took me to PNG. This guy on the left, the Caucasian guy, is a really guru neonatologist, and he just, in terms of adaptability, he would take a really old bedside ultrasound. We learnt how to do CPAP using a fish tank and really simple things. And I heard the last speaker talk a bit about the things that you get to do in your intern year. Well, this is taking it back to the things you get to do in a first year as a first year, second year medical student. And I don't think there's anything more, that resonates with knowing with COVID how much PNG, our closest neighbours, are suffering at the moment. So really amazing opportunities. And as a rural journalist, that's not to say that specialists aren't certainly useful if you're interested in overseas international developing health, but certainly it really came to light that for clinical on the ground type work, a rural journalist is absolutely, I think, one of the most useful kind of doctors to be when you're doing international health. Again, this is just showing Queenslanders and other ACRM registrars around Australia that our part of Victoria is really lovely. And I hope with COVID that you guys are exploring our area. And if anyone wants to work near South Gippsland, come and find me. I've also locumed and worked a bit in Thursday Island, and I think it's a little bit of a poster girl for ACRM and being a rural journalist, because that's how you get to work. You fly in a chopper to your remote clinics. Again, the work is incredible. It's sad, absolutely, but super rewarding, I guess. And also, I came as a doctor who was heavily pregnant, and instead of that being an issue in my workforce, it was utterly embraced. Also, again, more international developing world health. I spent some time in rural South Africa, where 40% of the pregnant women and the general population had HIV and complications of it. That was a little bit confronting to get there when you work in obstetrics and there's a lot of blood, but when you're there, you kind of just get used to it. And again, really cemented that I really wanted to be a ACRM or a rural journalist. And probably I meant to say that I initially went into emergency training, also another really generalist type specialty, but I went in there thinking it was perhaps a bit more prestigious to do, if I was to be honest, and there was definitely a bit of ego involved. And now I just think, I'm glad that that didn't get in the way of doing what I wanted to do. These are my 3, they're not triplets. I would be way more stressed than I am, but they're my 3 kids, boys, and I've actually had a 4th one since then. So maybe in particular to the females out there, it's really flexible and it's busy, but it's totally doable. And the work in general, the workplace environment when you're a rural journalist is really supportive. This is just where I live at the moment on a farm, and I am a city girl from Melbourne, and I never thought that I would end up doing something like this. And learning lots of, my husband is also a rural journalist. He does GP anaesthetics and obstetrics, and he's taught me lots about doing obstetrics on animals. So that's been quite useful, especially when I'm going to work and there's a whole bunch of animals that go across our road and obstruct my road, and some of them have been in obstructed labour. So jack of all trades. That's my house the other week when it was really horrible and cold, but these are the amazing views that you get to enjoy. They look like happy snaps, but this is actually part of you and where you could be and what you could be doing and where you could be working. That's my backyard. I'm shamelessly plugging, I know. This is Castle Rock, I think, in Townsville, where I did my Masters in Public Health. This is not me, but somebody who has worked in Mount Buller doing rural journalism, one of my registrars. Does anyone know what the antidote to FOMO is? When I asked a whole bunch of ACRIM people, they all said, just do more. And I said, but I found this, JOMO, and I think with COVID and lockdown, you know, I think there's some real pearls of wisdom that we can learn from COVID. Just the idea that it's actually okay not to do, you know, not to miss out. And it's okay to not worry about, you know, what others are doing, and classic comparisonitis, where we compare ourselves to our colleagues and what people think is makes you worthy. You're really worthy doing what you want to do. And I guess if it's a specialty, that's great. If it's a rural journalism, that's even better for me. And you know, if you don't know what you want to do at this point, that's totally fine. And I guess if I can be of any help with talking to you about what you want to do with your careers and in life, whether that's rural journalism or something else, please let me know. I got invited to do a blog, I think on the wards it's called, where there's lots of different doctors that share their stories. So that's me. Come find me if you ever need. And the last thing is our ACRIM website. I'm just trying to, anyone? So lots of people have done lots of really exciting things. So these are our registrars, by the way. This is what our registrars look like. This is where they work. It just looks like some happy snap holiday exotic scene, but this is actually their workplace.
Elise, you might just need to reshare your screen, sorry.
Oh, sorry, thank you. How do I do that?
Good.
Is that better? Can you see?
No, you just have to stop sharing and reshare. And I'll just let you know you got 1 minute left.
Ah, perfect. I did it. Okay, so share the screen again. Is that right? Share screen. Sorry, 1 minute. If it doesn't make it, we won't make it. I just wanted to show you the ACRIM website. Desktop? Is that? Now, back to Safari. Can you see that? Jade?
Yes.
Yes, great. So I just want to let you know, this is what our ACRIM website looks like. You can join as a member, as a student, without actually being, you know, without committing to being a rural journalist. So don't feel like if you do it, it means that, you know, or anything like that. There's this, you know, these are what our registrars look like. And this is where they're working. So it looks like some amazing exotic adventure holiday snaps. But this is actually the face of our registrars and where they are. So some are a few in Antarctica, a few doing retrieval, and I don't know why, but I got put with me and the pig. So that's me. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks again to ACRM for sponsoring our event tonight. Yeah, it was great to hear your story about being a rural generalist. So we're going to move on now to our third doctor or fourth doctor for the night, who's Dr. Emma Widdicombe, who's going to be talking about Ballarat health.
Hi everyone, my name's Emma. I think I would have met some of you before. I think we've had quite a few students from various unis through Ballarat, so I'm sure I've met you before. Just a little bit of background about me. I went to Monash as an undergrad for med school, and then I actually did quite a lot of my training in Bendigo, as I think that I'll eventually end up working regionally as I grew up in regional Victoria. I had a great experience at Bendigo, but I wanted to try somewhere a similar size but slightly different, so I opted to go to Ballarat, even though I hadn't actually done any placement there before. So I had a really great experience in Ballarat in my internship, and so I actually elected to stay in my PGY 2 year, and I did 6 months of pediatrics and 6 months of obstetrics that year, and I'm currently PGY 3 doing peds training this year, so I'm in my first year of training. I think something that I'd say about Ballarat, and I guess any hospital that you choose to go to in general, is that I think someone mentioned it before, it really needs to be about what's best for you, and I think doing what feels right for you. For me, I learn really well from experience and from being more hands-on. I'm not as good at just studying and retaining information that way. I do better from doing things, and I think my internship in Ballarat was really helpful with that. We had, I mean, I think you've got all the information about the rotations that are available and stuff like that, but essentially in terms of your core rotations, you do get great exposure. There's 4 medical teams and 4 surgical teams, but they're all general medical and general surgical teams with an additional subspecialty focus. So you get a little bit of an exposure with consults and such, but primarily you still do your time being on take and seeing general patients as well, which I think is a real benefit in an internship, to have some elements that are quite generalized so that you get more exposure. With regards to support, I felt really well supported in Ballarat. There was an actual, a team of 4 staff members purely to support the interns. So 2 of them were working in medical admin and the other 2 were doctors. One was one of the gen med consultants and the other was an ED physician who actually has a couple of children through med school, and one's currently a resident. So I think she had quite a good insight into the kinds of things that stress you out early on in your career, and were all very approachable and helpful to all of us at various times. And we also had weekly teaching, which I think most hospitals do, but I really felt like we got a really good range of teaching through that. It was very clear to all of the registrars and consultants that that was protected teaching time. It was expected we'd hand our pager over to be able to go to that. And I think we all got a lot out of that, particularly in the first, I think 6 or 8 weeks. They were 2-hour sessions instead of 1 hour, and were very sort of generalized, helpful, practical sessions, which was really great. In terms of career progress, most of the interns sort of went 1 or 2 ways in my experience. So again, it depends on what's best for you, but about half of us, there was about 35 of us, and half elected to go back to Melbourne for the PGY 2 year, and everybody who wanted to go back to Melbourne got a job in Melbourne. So I wouldn't be worried about that if that's one of your concerns. And then the other half chose to stay. So like I said, it depends on what works best for you. I really wanted to do peds, but I wasn't 100% sure. So I wanted to be able to do a peds rotation before I applied to the program, and was lucky enough to get 6 months. And then I also wanted to do ONG before I did peds, because I thought that knowledge would be really helpful, given that it's hard to get neonatal experience in basic training, and again ended up with 6 months, which is pretty lucky. I feel like regional hospitals do have that benefit. You're more likely to get some of those rotations that are a bit more competitive, but regardless, I would say it's easy to go back to Metro if that's what you choose, or if your family or your partner's there and that's what's your priority. But I did find that in Ballarat, I had really great access to the consultants too. So through journal clubs and just running into them when you walk in the lake, things like that. And I think even if they're not the kind of people that you would want to hang out with all the time, it is beneficial that they do remember you. And I think that comes in handy further down the track if you were to rotate back as a registrar or something like that, if they'll remember your face and they know you from when you were a junior. In terms of advantages, like I said, it's far more procedurally involved, I think, just because the teams are smaller, there are less teams. If there's something going on that's exciting, you'll be one of the first ones there. So, for example, on ED nights, there'll just be a registrar and intern in the bays, and the other residents and registrars will be elsewhere. So if anything exciting happens, you'll get to see. Another example was when I was on Gen Surge, there was actually a bus crash in Ballarat, and so it was a code brown and everyone was moved out of ED, and it was, I mean, terrifying, but also quite exciting. All of the surge interns got to go down, and essentially every bay in ED became a trauma bay. We realised that the overhead call wouldn't have been heard in theatre, so all the interns had to go into all of the theatres and tell the registrars and consultants that there was a school bus that had crashed and we had 20-something patients coming down. But it was really great to get to sort of watch how something like that can make everyone become a little bit more resourceful and actually just work together. And yeah, you can actually assess a trauma with far less than I thought you could, which was interesting. And I think in general, you have better respect for resources and understanding, like was mentioned before, transferring out, being able to stabilize a patient with what you have available to you, I think takes you back to the real basics of medicine. And I think they're the really important skills that you need to try and acquire during internship. Disadvantages, there are less subspecialties, obviously, but like I said, there are subspecialties allocated to the core teams as well. So for example, when I was on Gen Surge, I was on a colorectal team, but then one of the surgeons also had an interest in cardiothoracic. So I used to go into theatre with him and put in chest tubes and things like that, which I obviously didn't want to be a surgeon, but I found that really interesting and engaging. And I still learnt a lot from the rotation because they wanted me to have that experience. So I think even though there aren't formal subspecialty teams, I liked the benefit of having a general team with also additional things to keep it interesting as well. The other main disadvantage I would say to Ballarat is that it's really rainy and really windy. It rains and there is an icy wind for about 11 and a half months of the year. So if you don't like the cold, you might really struggle. I definitely did, but luckily in COVID, there wasn't too much to do anyway, I suppose. So if you really, really struggle with the cold, maybe Ballarat is not for you. In terms of the HMO streams, I just want to quickly touch on this. There are 4 main streams, but it is somewhat flexible as well. So you can of course do a general stream, a medical stream, a surgical stream, a crit care stream, or the year that I did, which was, it's technically like a pre-GP year because it gives you the prerequisite rotations that you need if you want to do GP. But anyone who wants to do PEDS or ONG tends to go that way. And whatever your preference is, you can usually get at least 6 months usually of what you would like. So I obviously opted for PEDS, but I have a couple of friends who got 12 months of ONG at Ballarat, which was pretty great for them as well and for their preferences in their careers. So yeah, I think that's everything. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me. Always happy to answer them, but good luck for your applications. It seems really stressful, but it'll be over before you know it. And a lot of your colleagues will probably give you advice, but just remember, none of you have done it before. So take that with a grain of salt. No one has the experience yet. So just try and be kind to each other, and wherever you go, it does not mean that you cannot pursue a particular career. You'll be able to make it work. There's lots of freedom to move around once you're in residency.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Emma. We'll move on to our final speaker now, Dr. Monique Bahari, who will be speaking about the Murray to Mountains internship experience.
Hey everyone, I'm just going to quickly share my screen. All right, can we all see that? Good. All right, so I'm an M2M intern at the moment. All right, so just quickly things I'm going to run through, a little bit of the M2M program, what being a rural intern has been like for me so far, and then a bit of pros and cons, because I think everyone likes to hear about those. So what the Murray to Mountains internship program is, you are based in one of 2 hospitals, so either in Wangaratta or Albury-Wodonga. You get 3 hospital terms, which is generally ED, Med, and Surge or Ortho, depending on which hospital, and then you get 2 GP terms. So location-wise, this is a very bad map, but basically it's a majorly, like it's a huge catchment area. So you can be in GP practices all across, up from on the Murray into the mountains, which is, I think, really cool. You do get one GP practice for both terms though, so you don't really get to shuffle between the different ones. So a little bit about me, currently based in Wangaratta. I've just done my ED term, which I think was really great here in Wangaratta. There's a lot of support and there's a lot of hands-on time. I'm currently on Gen Med, which is a lot more administrative type work and a lot of paperwork, a lot of phone calls, but once again, a lot of support. Going to ortho next, and then going to be doing my GP in Cobram, which is just down the road from Cactus Country, if anyone's planning on visiting that at some point. And then background before that, so I'm an MD from Monash. I had a lot of rural placement during med school that I chose to do. So I was in Sale, Leongatha, a bit in Warrigal, and then Bendigo for most of last year. And I'm a BMP bonded doctor. All right, so pros and cons. This is the main thing. So I think being hands-on is a big pro of going rural, and especially in Wangaratta. I think some of the cool things I've got to do this year, so a lot of cannulas, which I think is a general intern job. Some suturing, I've done a back slab for a foot. I've been able to administer IM ketamine for procedural sedation. I've done a direct cardioversion for someone in rapid AF. And I did an in and out catheter on one of my cover shifts. Obviously, there is a lot of support and you do get supervision if you're not quite comfortable doing things on your own. And they won't make you do something that you're not ready to do. But I think taking that opportunity is something that you really should do if you get it. And so that sort of links in with my point too, which I've had a lot of good support. All the seniors have been really friendly, and you just go to anyone and ask questions, and they don't expect you as an intern to necessarily know all the things or have it all together. And there were many times where I'd have seen a patient in the ED and I'd go to my senior in charge and just essentially just given them all this information and then told them I have no idea what to do / where I'm going, which was very reassuring to me that I didn't have to figure that out on my own initially. Point 3 for pros is community. I think a couple of people have already touched on this, but being in an environment where there's not a lot of you and oftentimes you've moved up from various different places, you do tend to get quite close to the other interns, and you do form sort of friendships and almost family connections with the people you're living with and working with. And even to a further extent, the other people at work, so nursing staff, allied health, everyone's got this sense of community of wanting to work well together and do the best for our patients. Point 4, I think having the responsibility of seeing your own patients is definitely a pro, obviously with the proviso that you have adequate supervision and you're not unsupported or not being unsafe. I think it gives you the opportunity to become a better doctor and to sort of work on your clinical management skills and create the kind of doctor and what sort of approach you want to have with your patients. On the con side, I think responsibility is also quite a daunting thing for someone who's thinking about going rural and worried that they're going to be given all this responsibility or having to see a greater patient load that you might be able to manage, or just worried that maybe in med school you were sort of stayed in the back or you weren't that one always putting up your hand. But I think I've had a really good experience with all the teams I've been on. And I made it very clear of what I thought I was capable of doing. And if I didn't feel comfortable doing something, everyone's been really good about that. Distance and isolation, I think, is also a hard thing about moving to a new rural location. So I myself don't have any ties to Wangaratta or knew anyone who'd been here before. So moving up was a bit scary initially, and given that it's a bit far from Melbourne, I think it's a good 3-hour drive back to Melbourne, and missing family and friends back home. But then again, I think you have to make the best of whatever connections you can here. And that sort of ties in with point 3, FOMO, which we have already heard about. I think you get this feeling that you're missing out on what's going on in Melbourne, missing out on the specialties, the subspecialties, and potentially missing out on career progressive activities. But I don't think that's the case. And I think you can have great experiences anywhere you are. And in internship especially, having a general experience will probably do you a lot better than seeing all the subspecialties, unless you want to follow that path to become something super specialised, in which case that's probably a whole different ball game. I think that's all I had. I had left time for questions, and I put my email there if anyone wants to ask me specifically about Wangaratta or the Murray to Mountains program. I'd be happy to be contacted. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Monique. So we're going to open up now and ask some of the questions that we've had submitted. So I'll hand it over to some of the other Rural Club presidents to ask questions.
Thanks so much, Jade. I guess I'll start. Thank you so much to our presenters, particularly the interns. I think they've answered a lot of the questions we had, so thank you so much. There's a couple of questions here about going through the VRPA pathway versus the general pathway. So if I want to intern at one of the bigger regional hospitals, will I be disadvantaged if I apply through the general pathway compared to applying through VRPA?
If you're interested, you won't be disadvantaged. If you're interested in one of the big regional hospitals, they will be featured in both the VRPA as well as in the second round. So they will have positions in both. It's not a disadvantage because of the nature of, they have a number of positions and they're looking to take from both cohorts. So there'll be no disadvantage. But if you wanted to, if you're sure about wanting to be rural, you go into the rural match or the VRPA. But if you're not sure, then it's best that you go into the second round.
Yeah, and I think you said earlier, Julie, that the number of positions you won't really know until so everyone enters. But will that be released in terms of the numbers that are available, say through the general stream?
Yep, we'll let everybody know once we know what the calculation is. So we will release. We're creating, PMCV is creating a Facebook page, like an official Facebook page, that will be published on that once the match is open.
Okay, thank you.
I've got one here as well. Just in terms of the interview process, we've just had some questions around people wanting to make sure or querying if they would definitely have a person with the hospitals of their highest preferences. So the example here is if they put both Bendigo and Echuca, will their interview have both a Bendigo and an Echuca representative on the panel in their live interview?
Yes, definitely. The regional panels are made up of all representatives of each of of all the hospitals in the region. Yep.
Wonderful, thank you.
We also have a question regarding how many Victorian Rural Medical Scholarships are awarded each year?
There's 12 at $20,000 each.
Okay, I might throw a question to interns or junior doctors. Did you have any safety concerns living or working in a regional or rural area?
I'm happy to answer that a little bit. I've never felt unsafe. I think it's probably the opposite. I feel more safe. I think everyone's pretty community focused and oriented, even outside of work. And yeah, I've felt like fine.
And in terms of some of the health services, do they offer ongoing contracts after internship?
So it's Jess here from Bendigo. Last year we were offered a 2-year contract mid-internship, which we were able to roll through just for the general streams. You still had to apply for the specialty streams through the match as a resident. I believe they're in the process of doing the 2-year contract for the current interns again, but I'm not fully aware of the actual details of it. But at this stage, generally most people who want a job at Bendigo get one the year after. May not always be in the specialty streams, but for the general streams particularly.
It's Shane here from the VRGP as well. Just wanted to add to that, all of the 35 VRGP positions, and again, I mentioned before, you know, there's several of them have 5 in each region, one has 15. Each one of those positions has a connection to a year 2 position. So basically that pathway is already set for you. As long as you meet the standards required and as long as you're interested in going down that pathway, there's a position there for you.
Thank you. And a lot of the, in all the talks, you all mentioned that you wear different hats and you step up to the plate a little bit more than maybe some other metropolitan doctors with opportunities. What skills should we be developing if we're looking to go rural before we start internship?
Hi, it's Jess again here from Bendigo. I would suggest just having a well-rounded kind of CV or personality, I suppose, of different aspects of your career. Just being broad would be my suggestion, not too narrow-minded or narrow-focused, because your narrow opinions can change or your narrow interests. So just having a broad interest, I think, would be my best advice.
And I might jump in here too, as a supervisor of interns, that really, I think rural interns have unprecedented access directly to their supervisors, whereas in many metropolitan services, you're supervised by registrars or senior registrars or advanced trainees. Whereas in rural, regional, and definitely in rural generalism, you're actually supervised directly by your consultant much of the time. And therefore, if you are maybe, you know, wanting to gain some particular skills or realising that you have a particular area that you'd like to work on, you've got so much more access to that individualised education in the rural areas.
I would definitely follow on from that. I wouldn't worry too much about developing skills as a medical student. I think it's more important to be open to learning them, because when you get to work, if you haven't necessarily done a lot of a procedure, at least in the WANG ED, there's a lot of see one, do one, teach one, and you definitely do learn a lot like that. So if you haven't necessarily done something before, it's not going to hold you back from learning a new skill at all.
I was going to say, sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, you know, when I think about that, and I supervise, interns and junior doctors, I think actually the people that I think suit rural pathways are the ones that it's not about necessarily your resume. You don't have to do a PhD. It's not how you look on paper. It's how you are, your willingness to embrace people, uncertainty, be able to reflect, learn, and, you know, these skills are life skills. So not only will it make you an amazing doctor, but it will make you an amazing friend, parent, you know, partner, niece, nephew, all that. So good luck.
Thank you so much, Elise. I had a question about the rural generalist training and whether you can work in a metropolitan area with that qualification. So like either in emergency in a metropolitan area with that qualification.
Yep, so both RG qualifications, so through ACRM and RACGP, allow you to work anywhere in Australia. So although it's basically exactly that, training you to work anywhere in Australia, in Metro or in an MM7 out on Thursday Island. That's the whole point of the training. And you're able to access Medicare, both in Metro and country areas, plus work in a Metro hospital. And I definitely know of rural generalists who work in some of the larger city emergency departments, or perhaps live there and do some locums as well. It basically depends on what advanced skill you have, what skills you've gained along the way, and where your interest lies. So if anything, it actually opens up more opportunities rather than restricting them.
Yeah. So just because it's a rural pathway or program or college, it doesn't actually mean that you're bonded rurally. And I often I've worked at the Western, major tertiary centre doing a lot of obstetrics. And then I've worked, at Thursday Island, where I'm the only person there, and if there's nobody else, then, well, not Thursday Island, there's other people there, but remote places where you're it. So the world's your ticket.
And sorry, I cut you off there, Elise. A lot of RGs work in retrieval medicine as well as a side job. They do GP anaesthetics, they do obstetrics, they do dual access in terms of there's many FACEMs that are also FACRMs as well. They dual fellow because there's RPL with a lot of both specialties there, and that opens up a lot of opportunities. I don't think there's any other career in medicine that provides you with the flexibility and the different options that rural generalism does. And even in my young career, I've gone from doing obstetrics to medical education to leadership to alpine medicine to teaching to working still in ED to doing general practice. Like the list is endless. And if you love all different types of medicine, then RG is the specialty for you, and it definitely opens up opportunities.
We've got a question from regarding the kind of logistics. So how does it work regarding where you will work within a specific region? So for example, where can you be in the Barwon region, and are the rotations spread such that you'd need to live away from your base for some of your rotations?
Is that a VRGP specific question or a general or rural intern question?
I think it may be a little bit of both.
So with the VRGP, the nature of being able to do your core rotations in a teaching regional hospital, but then also experiencing true rural generalism, does mean that most of the GP rotations are away from your base. However, in Barwon, it depends once again whether you're doing your base at Geelong, or for the VRGP, it's actually based out of Warrnambool, so that the GP clinic is in Warrnambool in that particular region. But what I would suggest is that you talk to the regional coordinators in your region specifically about what your interests are and where you perhaps might like to base yourself and what rotations you're interested in, because they can then look at how to target and develop your own pathway. And that's the beauty of the case management that the VRGP offers. Shane, did you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, Angela, all I wanted to add is that if you're in the VRGP program and you're in a single town, so if you're doing both your general practice and your core rotations in the same town, then obviously that's not an issue, you're not moving anywhere. If you're moved out to another town, so what happens most of the time is that all your core rotations will be done in one town, and if you need to go to a general practice rotation that's out of that town, the good thing is that the accommodation is sorted out for you anyway. So it's not as if you're travelling back and forward to a single base. So that accommodation on your rotating region from a VRGP perspective is in that town. So you integrate into that community a little bit as well, whether it be for 10 or 20 weeks.
There's a couple of questions sort of from international students. So as an international student, what are the chances of getting a rural regional internship?
I can answer that if you like. I've just had a question privately in the chat about that. International students aren't eligible for the first round, which is VRPA, and they're actually in priority group 3. And priority group 3 is we have the first round, which will be VRPA, the second round, which will be our main metro match with some rural positions in there. And prior to Group 3 applicants won't actually have an opportunity to look at any positions or be considered for any positions until both of those rounds are completed. And that's usually about August. It always happens that people, for whatever reason, choose to decline their offer after once accepting it, because other interstate offers come out or other things change for people. And so positions become available across the state at all different locations, both rurally and in the metro areas. And PMC coordinates what we call the unmatched list, and basically we make available what are the positions still available as they come, as they present, because it's really hard to tell what's going to happen. Not every health service ends up taking P3s, but a vast majority do.
Thanks, Julie. I'm not sure if any of the interns have any experience with how many international students were within their health service. We've got a question about what about further study or research while doing a rural internship or as a junior doctor rurally, such as PhD or a master's?
So it's Jess from Bendigo. I personally haven't done a PhD or a master's, but you can do research basically from anywhere, as long as you have someone to support you. And I suppose it helps if you have access to like a university library, like online kind of thing. So I don't think that hinders your location. You hear of people doing PhDs and masters online. So especially in this COVID world we're living in, I think you can do it from anywhere as long as you seek support and networks to help you network that. It's fine, and you don't have to have that particularly always to pursue a career. I know a lot of people hammer on about it, but you can have a career without research. I think understanding research is important, but if it's not something you're interested in pursuing yourself, then I wouldn't feel pressured to do that post fulfilling obviously the university applications.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say, internship is a really busy year, and it's really, really full, and you have a full clinical load during your internship. So any research or masters, although you'd be incredibly well supported, and regional hospitals are usually very enthusiastic to have people doing those projects, it would be in addition to your workload. So if you're considering research or masters because you love it and that's your interest and something you want to do, that's great. However, if you're considering it because you think you need to fatten your CV or you need to do things like that, I would just have another think again about what Elise was talking about, that FOMO, as to why you're actually needing it, because definitely for a lot of careers you don't, particularly not in the rural, and gaining a broader experience rather than necessarily another paper on your CVs is far more important.
Yeah, I would absolutely reiterate what Angela said. But having said that, there's a lot of flexibility with some of the courses. I did MPH and tropical medicine up from Townsville, James Cook Uni, and even 15 years ago when I did it pre-COVID, pre-Zoom, you could do it online, and you could do one subject, once a year. So it was very flexible. And then I could do 2-week blocks, which was one of the, that trip to PNG was a 2-week rotation in pediatrics. And so you can sort of certainly make it work. And a lot of universities, especially now post-COVID, there'll be lots of flexibility. But I agree, you want to do it because you want to do it, not because you think you need to do it.
Thank you so
very
much.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Megan.
you go, Jade. I think
Okay,
that's all the questions. So
yeah, no worries. So just a few more things before we wrap up tonight. So again, thank you very much to our speakers for all making time to come and talk to us today, and also to Akram for sponsoring our event tonight. So what you can see now on the screen is our 2022 Rural Internship Guidebook, which we've been making this year. All the Victorian Rural Health Clubs have been putting together. This will come out soon. So if you follow any of our rural health clubs on Facebook, you'll see it pop up It will be available before internship applications open, and it has accounts from junior doctors about each of the potential internships available next year, as well as some information about like rotations and yeah, pros and cons of each service, things like that. And then finally, I'd like to announce tonight's door prizes. So these door prizes have been provided by Monash Rural Health's regional training hubs, Gippsland and Northwest Victoria. The teams at Monash Rural Health, Gippsland and Northwest Victoria Regional Training Hub are here to support junior doctors and medical students. They offer annual prizes and the Rural Resume Boost Bursary Program, access to many different locally delivered free accredited short course training, have 21 specialty rural pathway roadmaps, and produce a podcast on regional medical careers called Dr. What, Dr. Where. So congratulations to the students whose names are on the screen. We'll be emailing you to organise to give you these prizes. So thank you very much again to everyone for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. Thank you to the other Victorian Rural Health Club presidents for making this possible. And we hope you all have a great night. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.